Earlier in July, the US Senate has decided to propose to cancel the tax credit for ethanol. It was an ethanol subsidy that has started in 1978 as a way to promote the use of ethanol in transportation. However, the ethanol industry now in the US is very well developed. US is the first producer and consumer of ethanol and has even started to export ethanol. With the current price of gasoline and corn, ethanol industry is become very profitable during the year, when at the same time the US budget faced several constraints, as you may know. And in this condition, it has been decided to stop giving blenders this credit, these subsidies of nearly $0.50 per gallon. Obviously, the current budget situation in the US is pushing for this. But at the same time, you have a lot of interest saying that the ethanol program of the US has gone too far or also has created negative externalities. By using corn to fuel cars, you destabilize the feed and the food markets, and therefore you increase food prices and feed prices for the livestock industries, hurting other economic agents in your country. Moreover, when the US starts to export ethanol, the subsidy can be seen as an unfair trade practices and may lead to retaliation by other countries like Brazil. Indeed, Brazil was the most important producer and exporter of ethanol until the new role played by the US, and earlier this year we have started to see export of corn ethanol made in the US to Brazil, a traditional producer of sugarcane ethanol. So we are facing now a new situation where the cost for the taxpayer of this subsidy was high, the need for the development and the survival of the ethanol industry is not here anymore, and at the same time, ethanol, both, as I've said, due to effect on food and feed prices, but also the environmental value of producing ethanol to fuel car has been under attack for the last few years, in particular when you take into account the emissions coming from what has been called the land use effect, meaning that if you produce more corn in the US and you export less corn, for instance, you can ask other countries to extend their own agricultural land, leading to deforestation and more emissions. So the economic analysis and the environmental analysis of ethanol has led to more and more criticism of this product, and we are now in a situation where policymakers can remove more easily this support, in particular, as I've said, in the context of the US deficit, knowing that the cost for the taxpayer was above $6 billion a year. Now, what are the consequences for the rest of the world? On one hand, we have to be clear. This level of subsidies was not driving the high level of consumption of ethanol in the US anymore, because first, the US have a mandate that give a lower bound to the consumption, but even today it's profitable to produce ethanol even above this mandate level. So removing the tax credit today is not going to lead to a fall of consumption of ethanol. So the corn market is not going to be affected directly. In the medium run, we can still expect an effect. But overall, the impact of even the whole ethanol production in the US on food prices in the US is very weak. So researchers have shown that it's not even 2 cents per dozen of eggs, for instance. So we should not emphasize the consequences on food prices of this measure. Obviously, other producers of ethanol like Brazil will appreciate to see this distortion removed. But maybe what is more worrying to some extent is that without these direct subsidies, the industry is going to be very careful to continue to get support through other means, and in particular with the mandate. And if in the future price of gasoline and fossil fuel go down, price of corn remain high, the mandate will play a more important role. And why the mandate is more insidious is because it's not directly a cost paid by the taxpayer, but by the consumers, and so you have a less informed debate about its future. In addition, mandate create more distortion in terms of price volatility, and if we soon acknowledge and appreciate the removal of the subsidies as a distortion, we still be very careful about the remaining one, that is a mandate.